Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Lila, 29, stood frozen in the doorway, her champagne glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound was lost beneath the pounding of her heart as she stared at the scene before her. Ethan, 31, her fiancé of 2 years, tangled in the sheets with Sophia, 30, her best friend since college. Ethan! His name escaped her lips as a broken whisper. Two heads whipped around, eyes widening in horror. For one excruciating moment, nobody moved. Then Ethan scrambled to cover himself, his handsome face contorting into something between guilt and annoyance. "Lila, this isn't," he began, but Sophia's laugh cut him off. "Oh, please," Sophia sighed, making no effort to cover her naked body. "Let's not insult her intelligence on top of everything else." Lila's engagement ring caught the light, the 3-carat diamond that had once symbolized her future, now seeming to mock her with its brilliance. Downstairs, oblivious guests continued celebrating their engagement party, the muffled sounds of laughter and music creating a surreal backdrop to her world imploding. "How long?" Lila managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt. Ethan reached for his discarded shirt. "Baby, we can talk about this. It's just a mistake." 6 months, Sophia interjected, her eyes glinting with something close to satisfaction. "And sweetheart, he never loved you. He told me everything about your family's connections. That's what he really wanted access to." Ethan shot Sophia a venomous look. "Shut up." But Sophia seemed determined to twist the knife. "He said being with you was like doing business. Necessary, but boring." The words struck Lila like physical blows. Her chest tightened as though bands of steel were constricting around her lungs. This wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation of the most profound kind. "Your performance was quite convincing," Lila said finally, surprising herself with the cold dignity in her voice. "Both of you." She stepped back, pulled the 5-carat diamond engagement ring from her finger, and tossed it onto the rumpled bed. "I hope it was worth it." "Lila, wait!" Ethan called, but she was already moving, her designer gown sweeping behind her as she fled down the hallway. She bypassed the main staircase that would take her back to the party. She couldn't face those people, not with her makeup streaking and her dignity in tatters. Instead, she slipped down the service stairs and out a side exit of the luxury hotel where they'd been hosting their engagement celebration. Rain greeted her, a sudden spring downpour that matched her mood perfectly. Within seconds, her carefully styled hair was plastered to her neck, and her silk gown clung to her body. She kicked off her uncomfortable heels, the cool pavement beneath her bare feet strangely grounding as she began walking with no destination in mind. Thunder rumbled overhead as Lila wandered the streets of downtown, oblivious to the stares her bedraggled appearance attracted. The rain eventually slowed to a drizzle, but Lila was soaked to the bone, her teeth chattering slightly as the night air chilled her wet skin. She found herself in front of the Obsidian, one of the city's most exclusive hotels. Without thinking, she pushed through the revolving doors into the warmth of the lobby. The concierge's eyes widened at her appearance, a drenched woman in a torn designer gown, barefoot and wild-eyed. "Miss, can I help you?" he asked, already reaching for the phone, perhaps to call security. "The bar," Lila said, her voice hoarse. "I just need a drink." Something in her expression must have sparked sympathy, because after a moment's hesitation, he nodded toward an ornate doorway. "Through there, miss." The Obsidian's bar was dimly lit, all dark wood and amber lighting. A jazz quartet played softly in one corner. Despite her appearance, Lila walked to the bar with her head high, sliding onto a leather stool. "Manhattan, please," she told the bartender, who raised an eyebrow but nodded. As the bartender prepared her drink, Lila became aware of a presence beside her, a man taking the seat 2 stools away. She felt his gaze, but didn't turn. She wasn't interested in becoming some stranger's anecdote about the crazy woman he met in a bar. "Rough night?" His voice was deep with a hint of something she couldn't place. Amusement, perhaps? But not unkind. Lila turned then, a sharp retort ready on her lips, but the words died as their eyes met. The man watching her was breathtaking, tall and broad-shouldered, in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, with intense dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. His strong jawline was softened by sensual lips, currently curved in a half-smile. "You could say that," she finally replied, accepting her Manhattan from the bartender. The stranger raised his tumbler of amber liquid. Too bad nights that might yet turn around. Despite herself, Lila clinked her glass against his. The Manhattan burned pleasantly down her throat, warming her from within. "You looked like you could use this more than I could," the man said, shrugging off his suit jacket and offering it to her. Lila hesitated, then accepted it, draping the expensive wool around her shoulders. It carried his scent, sandalwood and something uniquely masculine that made her inhale a little deeper. "Thank you, I'm Lila." "Gabriel," he replied, those dark eyes never leaving hers. "Gabriel Hayes." Something shifted in the air between them. A recognition? A possibility? Lila took another sip of her drink, letting the alcohol fortify her. For the first time since discovering Ethan's betrayal, she felt something other than pain. "So, Lila," Gabriel said, sliding one stool closer, "care to tell me why the most beautiful woman I've ever seen is sitting in a hotel bar, soaking wet and barefoot in what's left of a Vera Wang original?" His observation about her gown's designer surprised a laugh out of her. "You know your women's fashion." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I know quality when I see it." His eyes held hers, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. There was something magnetic about him, a gravitational pull she couldn't explain. "It's a long story," she said. Gabriel glanced at his watch, a subtle, expensive timepiece that probably cost more than most cars. "I've got all night." And for reasons Lila couldn't explain, perhaps the vulnerability of having her heart shattered, perhaps the warmth in this stranger's eyes, or perhaps simply the need to unburden herself to someone who didn't know Ethan or Sophia, she began to talk. As the jazz quartet played on and their drinks were refreshed, Lila found herself revealing everything. The humiliating discovery in the bedroom, the cruel words exchanged, the shattering of trust she'd thought unbreakable. Gabriel listened without interruption, his eyes darkening with each painful detail of her betrayal. "Some people," he said when she finished, "don't recognize the value of what they have until it's gone." "And some people," Lila replied, surprising herself with her boldness, "see that value immediately." Their eyes locked across the polished bar surface, an electric current seeming to pass between them. In that moment, with rain still dripping from her hair and heartbreak still fresh in her chest, Lila felt something unexpected bloom within her, a dangerous, exhilarating spark of possibility. Gabriel leaned closer, his voice dropping to an intimate rumble that seemed to vibrate through her entire body. "So, what happens next in your story, Lila?" She didn't know it then, but her answer would change the course of her life forever. Chapter 2. Reckless Surrender. Dawn crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Obsidian's bar, casting golden light across the polished surfaces. Lila and Gabriel remained in their intimate bubble, the world outside forgotten as they shared confidences through the night. "I've never told anyone these things," Gabriel confessed, swirling the remains of his whiskey. "There's something about you, Lila." His eyes, deep and penetrating, seemed to caress her face. Lila felt both exposed and protected in his gaze. The heartbreak that had driven her here now felt distant, overshadowed by this inexplicable connection with a stranger. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't go back there. Can't face them all." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice held an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "Marry me, Lila." She blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, leaning closer. "Today." A startled laugh escaped her lips. "You're insane. We just met." "And yet," Gabriel said, his fingers brushing against hers on the bar top, "I feel like I've known you for years. Don't you feel it too?" She did. That was the troubling part. This magnetic pull between them defied logic, defied every cautionary tale she'd ever heard, yet it felt more real than the 2 years she'd spent with Ethan. "You're running from something too," she guessed, watching his expression shift subtly. "Perhaps we're both looking for an escape," he acknowledged. "I'm proposing a solution that benefits us both. A temporary arrangement, if you will, a marriage of convenience." The concept was so old-fashioned it seemed absurd, yet something in his proposition called to her. "With hopefully some very inconvenient attraction," he added, his eyes darkening as they dropped to her lips. Lila's heart raced. "Why would you want this?" "My reasons are my own," he replied, a shadow crossing his features. As yours are yours. No explanations needed, just two people offering each other sanctuary. She should say no, should thank him for the drinks and walk away. Instead, she heard herself ask, "How would this work?" "We get married today. No guests, no fanfare. We see where it leads us." His thumb traced circles on her palm, igniting trails of fire across her skin. "If it doesn't work, we part ways, no questions asked." Lila closed her eyes, imagining the shocked faces of Ethan and Sophia when they discovered she'd married someone else mere hours after their betrayal. The thought brought a savage satisfaction. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Sometimes crazy is exactly what we need." Gabriel's smile held promises of delicious secrets. "What do you say, Lila? Ready to scandalize society with me?" Reason argued against it, but reason hadn't protected her heart from Ethan's betrayal. Perhaps impulse deserved its chance. "Yes," she said, the word falling from her lips like a dare. "Yes, I'll marry you." Gabriel's smile was triumphant as he signaled for the check. "I'll have my driver bring the car around. But first," he pulled out his phone, made a quick call, and said only, "Arrange it." 1 hour. By noon, Lila stood beside Gabriel in a small chapel, wearing a simple cream dress he'd somehow procured through his hotel concierge. The ceremony was brief, witnessed only by the chapel staff who had seen countless impulsive unions, but still exchanged knowing glances at the palpable chemistry between this particular couple. When the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel's kiss was unexpectedly tender, a contrast to the intensity smoldering in his eyes. "Mrs. Hayes," he murmured against her lips, the sound of her new name sending an unexpected thrill through her body. They rode in companionable silence to what Gabriel called his place, a stunning penthouse overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline as sunset painted the clouds crimson and gold. "Drink?" Gabriel offered, moving to a well-stocked bar. Lila wandered to the windows, still processing the day's events. "I just married a stranger," she said, more to herself than to him. "Having regrets already?" His voice was closer than she expected. She turned to find him directly behind her, 2 glasses in hand. "Not regrets," she clarified, accepting the offered drink. "Disbelief." Gabriel's free hand came up to trace the curve of her cheek. "You're not the only one surprised by today's events." Their eyes locked, and the air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Lila took a steadying sip of her drink, the liquid courage burning down her throat. "So, what happens now, husband?" The word felt foreign on her tongue. Gabriel's eyes darkened at her use of the term. "That's entirely up to you." The truth was, she already knew, had known since that first electric glance across the bar. Setting down her glass, Lila stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I want to forget," she whispered, her fingers trailing up the lapel of his jacket. "Help me forget everything but this moment." With a groan that sounded torn from the depths of his soul, Gabriel captured her lips with his. The kiss was nothing like the chaste one they'd shared at the chapel. This was hunger and need and desperation, his mouth claiming hers with an urgency that made her knees weak. His hands spanned her waist, lifting her effortlessly. Instinctively, Lila wrapped her legs around him as he carried her through the penthouse to the master bedroom. He laid her on the king-size bed with surprising gentleness, his eyes never leaving hers. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, his voice strained with restraint. In answer, Lila reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt. Gabriel watched her, his breathing ragged, allowing her this control. When she'd exposed his chest, sculpted and tanned like a Renaissance statue come to life, she ran her fingers across the warm skin, marveling at the rapid beating of his heart beneath her palm. "I want this," she affirmed. "I want you." Something primal flashed in Gabriel's eyes. He captured her wrists in one hand, pinning them above her head as his mouth descended on hers again. His free hand found the zipper of her dress, slowly lowering it as his lips traced a burning path down her neck. "You're exquisite," he murmured against her collarbone, pushing the dress from her shoulders. What followed was a revelation. Ethan had been Lila's only lover, their intimacy predictable and safe. But with Gabriel, she discovered passion she never knew existed within herself. His touches were both reverent and commanding, drawing responses from her body she hadn't known it could give. As they moved together in the dimming light, Lila felt herself shattering and reforming with each caress, each whispered encouragement, each moment of increasingly intense pleasure. When they finally reached their peak together, her name on his lips and his branded on her heart, Lila knew with startling clarity that whatever this was between them, it was far more dangerous than she'd anticipated. Later, wrapped in tangled sheets, with Gabriel's arm draped possessively across her waist, Lila watched the city lights twinkle beyond the windows. She'd married a stranger to escape her pain, but somehow, in his arms, she'd found something she hadn't known she was seeking. "What are you thinking?" Gabriel asked, his voice husky with satisfaction. Lila turned to face him, her new husband, whose secrets matched her own. "That I've never made a better, reckless decision in my life." His answering smile held promises of pleasure and danger in equal measure. "This is just the beginning, Mrs. Hayes, just the beginning." Chapter 3. Intoxicating Discovery. Morning light filtered through sheer curtains, bathing the bedroom in a golden glow. Lila stirred, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous day crashed back into her consciousness: the betrayal, the bar, the impulsive wedding, and the night of passion that followed. She turned to find Gabriel watching her, his dark eyes intense and unreadable. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, voice raspy with sleep. Lila considered the question, taking inventory of her feelings. Surprisingly, regret wasn't among them. "No," she answered honestly. "You?" A slow smile spread across his face. "None whatsoever." His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I have a proposition for you." "Another one?" Lila laughed. "The last one led to marriage." "This one's less permanent," he assured her. "A honeymoon?" "A honeymoon," she repeated, testing the word. It seemed absurd. Honeymoons were for couples in love, not strangers who'd married on impulse. "I have a place on the coast, private, secluded. We could spend a week there, get to know each other properly." His fingers continued their maddening journey down her arm. "Unless you'd prefer to face the world's questions right away." The thought of explaining her sudden marriage to family and friends made Lila's stomach knot. A week's reprieve sounded like paradise. "The coast sounds perfect," she agreed. Gabriel's smile widened. "Pack light. We leave in an hour." 3 hours later, a sleek black car delivered them to what Gabrielle had modestly called a place on the coast. In reality, it was a stunning modern beach house perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, all glass and polished wood. "This is yours?" Lila asked as they stepped into the soaring, open-plan living area. "For now, it's ours," Gabriel corrected, setting down their bags. "Hungry?" They prepared lunch together in the gourmet kitchen, moving around each other with an ease that belied their brief acquaintance. Gabriel proved surprisingly adept, chopping vegetables with practiced precision. "You cook," Lila observed, impressed. "Don't sound so surprised," he teased. "I contain multitudes." After lunch, they explored the beach below the house, walking barefoot along the sand. The domesticity of it all, preparing food together, walking side by side, felt strangely natural, as if they'd known each other for years rather than days. As dusk approached, Gabriel opened a bottle of wine and led Lila to the house's infinity pool, which seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. "To new beginnings," he toasted, clinking his glass against hers. "To secrets shared," Lila countered, holding his gaze over the rim of her glass. Something flickered in Gabriel's expression. "Not all secrets are meant to be shared, even between husband and wife," he replied. His tone gentle but firm, Lila sipped her wine, studying him. "You're a puzzle, Gabriel Hayes. One you have no obligation to solve." He set down his glass and moved closer to her. "There are more pleasurable ways to spend our time." His hand cupped her cheek, and rational thought fled as his lips found hers. The kiss deepened quickly, wine forgotten, as desire flared between them. Without breaking the kiss, Gabriel lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the outdoor lounger under the darkening sky. They came together with an urgency that surprised them both. Gabriel worshipped her body with a thoroughness that left Lila trembling and calling his name. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the stars, Lila realized with startling clarity that whatever arrangement had brought them together, it had evolved into something neither had anticipated. The days that followed established a pattern. Mornings spent exploring the coastline, afternoons filled with conversations that skimmed the surface of their lives while avoiding deeper waters, and nights devoted to discovering each other's bodies with increasing familiarity and escalating passion. On their fourth day, a delivery arrived, groceries and fresh flowers brought by a staff member whose presence surprised Lila, as she hadn't realized the secluded property had regular service. The young man addressed Gabriel with a deference that immediately caught her attention. "Mr. Hayes," he said with a slight bow, "your additional requests have been arranged as specified. The chef will arrive at 6 as requested." "Thank you, Noah," Gabriel replied, signing the delivery confirmation with a practiced flourish that spoke of someone accustomed to authority. After Noah departed, Lila raised an eyebrow. "You seem to command quite a bit of respect." Gabriel shrugged casually. "I've been coming here for years." "And yet," she observed, arranging the fresh lilies in a crystal vase, "the staff acts like you own the place." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Perhaps I do." "You're being deliberately mysterious," she accused, but her tone was light. "Does it bother you?" he asked, coming up behind her to wrap his arms around her waist. "Yes," she admitted, "but it also intrigues me." His lips found the sensitive spot behind her ear. "Good. I'd hate to become predictable so soon in our marriage." That night, a storm rolled in from the ocean, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rumbled overhead. They'd made dinner together, another domestic scene that felt both foreign and familiar. "Tell me something true," Lila requested, as they sat before the fireplace, thunder punctuating the silence between them. Gabrielle studied her face in the flickering light. "I didn't plan any of this. That makes 2 of us." She took a sip of her wine. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," he echoed, his eyes darkening with an emotion she couldn't name. "I've never brought anyone here before." The admission hung between them, weighted with significance. "Why me?" she asked softly. Instead of answering, Gabriel took the glass from her hand and set it aside. He pulled her onto his lap, his hands framing her face with a tenderness that contrasted with the storm's violence outside. "Because I haven't been able to think straight since I saw you in that bar," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Because there's something between us that defies explanation." The raw honesty in his eyes made Lila's heart race. She leaned forward, capturing his lips with hers, pouring every confusing emotion of the past days into the kiss. What followed was different from their previous encounters. Where before there had been urgency and passion, now there was a deliberate exploration, an unhurried discovery of each other's bodies that felt almost reverential. Gabriel lavished attention on every inch of her skin, whispering praise against her collarbone, her hip bone, the inside of her thigh. When he finally moved above her, their gazes locked in a connection that transcended the physical. Lila felt something shift between them, something profound and terrifying in its intensity. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, listening to the storm recede, Lila traced idle patterns on Gabriel's chest. "You've ruined me," she whispered, only half joking. His arm tightened around her. "How so?" "How could I ever go back to ordinary life after this?" Gabriel's chuckle rumbled beneath her ear. "Who says you have to?" Their honeymoon days blended together in a haze of pleasure and discovery, creating a timeless bubble away from reality. On their final morning, Lila woke to find Gabriel on the phone, his tone clipped and authoritative as he spoke about the board and quarterly projections, words that seemed jarringly out of place in their romantic retreat. He ended the call abruptly when he noticed her watching. "Trouble?" she asked. "Nothing I can't handle." He smiled, but didn't quite reach his eyes. "Unfortunately, real life beckons. We need to head back today." As they packed, Lila found herself reluctant to leave the bubble they'd created. In this secluded paradise, she'd begun to feel emotions for Gabriel that went far beyond physical attraction. Emotions that both thrilled and terrified her. "Ready?" Gabriel asked, appearing in the doorway with their bags. Lila nodded, trying to ignore the sense that once they left this place, everything would change. She had no idea how prophetic that feeling would prove to be. As their car wound its way back toward the city, Gabriel's phone buzzed continuously with messages and calls he largely ignored. He seemed tenser with each passing mile, the carefree lover of the past week gradually replaced by someone more controlled, more guarded. "Where to?" Lila asked as they approached the city limits, suddenly realizing she didn't know where home was in this strange new life, when Gabriel's expression was unreadable as he replied, There's something I need to show you." The car turned onto a private road that wound uphill through manicured grounds. As they crested the hill, an imposing mansion came into view, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and stone. "Gabriel," Lila began, confusion coloring her voice. "Where are we?" His eyes met hers, serious and intent. "Home, Lila. Our home." As the car pulled up to the entrance, staff emerged to greet them. A distinguished older man opened Gabriel's door with practiced efficiency. "Welcome back, Mr. Hayes," he said. "The situation at the office has been contained as requested." "Thank you, Charles," Gabriel replied, helping Lila from the car. As they entered the marble foyer with its soaring ceiling and museum-quilled art, the truth dawned on Lila with crystal clarity. This was no ordinary home, and Gabriel was no ordinary man. "Who are you really?" she whispered, the magnitude of her ignorance crashing down around her. Gabriel's expression was both apologetic and resolute. Someone who should have been more honest from the beginning. He took her hand, his touch both familiar and suddenly foreign. "We have a lot to talk about." Chapter 4. Gilded Cage. Leela stood in the center of Gabriel's study. No, their study now, apparently. Struggling to process the magnitude of what she was seeing. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall, while another featured a massive fireplace flanked by original artwork she recognized from gallery exhibitions. The wall behind his desk was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the city below. "You're Gabriel Hayes," she said finally, her voice unnaturally calm. "The Gabriel Hayes, Hayes Enterprises." He nodded once, watching her carefully. "Yes, billionaire, reclusive CEO, the man Forbes called the most enigmatic figure in modern business." Each word felt like another piece of a puzzle she should have solved sooner. "The press exaggerates," he said, but there was no denial in his tone. Lila laughed, the sound brittle even to her own ears. "Really? Which part? The billions, the business empire, or just the enigmatic part? Lila, you let me believe you were just some guy, some random man in a bar." The betrayal felt fresh, cutting through the happiness of their honeymoon week. "I married you thinking we were equals." Gabriel moved toward her, but she backed away. "We are equals," he insisted. "How?" she demanded. "You have all the power here, all the information. I don't even know who I married." "You know me better than anyone," Gabriel countered, his voice low and intense. "What happened between us at the beach house? That was real. The man you married is the real me, not the persona in business magazines." "But you lied to me." "I never lied," he corrected. "I just didn't volunteer information you didn't ask for." Lila's eyes narrowed. "That's semantics and you know it." "Perhaps," he conceded. "But would you have married me if you'd known who I was? Or would you have assumed I had ulterior motives, that I was just another man trying to use you?" The question hit too close to home, echoing her experience with Ethan. Would she have trusted Gabriel's intentions if she'd known about his wealth and status? "That wasn't your decision to make," she said finally. "You robbed me of informed consent." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "You're right." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "I should have told you before the wedding. But I didn't plan any of this, Lila. Meeting you, marrying you. None of it was calculated." "Then why marry me at all?" she pressed. "You could have had a fling with the sad girl from the bar without the commitment." "Because from the moment I saw you, I wanted more than a fling." The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "And once I started talking to you, I couldn't bear the thought of letting you walk away." Lila turned toward the window, needing distance from the intensity of his gaze. The city lights twinkled below, reminding her how far removed they were from the real world up here in his ethereal mansion. "So what now?" she asked, her back still to him. "What exactly does being Mrs. Gabriel Hayes entail?" She heard him move closer, but he didn't touch her. "Whatever you want it to. This changes nothing about our arrangement." "It changes everything," she corrected, turning to face him. "You're not just Gabriel anymore. You're a public figure. There will be expectations, appearances, scrutiny." "I've kept my private life private for years," he said. "I can continue to do so." "And where do I fit into this private life of yours?" she challenged. "Am I supposed to be the secret wife you keep hidden away in your mansion?" Something dangerous flickered in Gabriel's eyes. "You are my wife. Secret or public, that's up to you. But make no mistake, Lila, I won't hide you unless you ask me to." The possessiveness in his tone sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. Despite her anger, she couldn't deny the pull between them remained as strong as ever. I need time, she said finally. Time to process all this. Gabriel nodded, respecting her space. Of course. Charles will show you to our bedroom whenever you're ready, or if you prefer separate accommodations for tonight. No, she interrupted, surprising herself with the vehemence of her response. The thought of sleeping without him after their week together was unexpectedly painful. I don't want separate rooms. Relief flashed across his features before he schooled his expression. I have work to catch up on. Take all the time you need. He moved toward the door, but Lila's voice stopped him. Gabriel, he turned, his hand on the doorknob. Are there any other secrets I should know about? For a moment, something vulnerable crossed his face, so quickly she might have imagined it. None that matter right now. After he left, Lila explored the study, running her fingers along the spines of first edition books, examining the awards mounted discreetly on one wall. Each discovery revealed another facet of the man she'd married. His literary tastes, his business accomplishments, the causes he supported through the Hayes Foundation. By the time she'd circled back to his desk, her anger had cooled, tempered by a growing understanding of why he might have kept his identity secret. Men like Gabriel Hayes never knew if they were wanted for themselves or their wealth. She, of all people, should understand that fear after Ethan's betrayal. A photograph on his desk caught her attention. Gabriel as a teenager, standing beside an older man with the same intense eyes. His father, presumably. The familial resemblance was striking, but where Gabriel's expression held warmth, the older Hayes's was cold and calculating. I see you've met my father. Lila startled at Gabriel's voice. He stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, looking more approachable than he had earlier. He looks formidable, she observed. He was. Gabriel moved into the room, coming to stand beside her. Brilliant businessman, terrible father. Was. He died 5 years ago. Gabriel's tone was neutral, but Lila sensed currents beneath the surface. Heart attack in the middle of a board meeting. Fitting, really. The company was always his true love. Lila studied his profile, seeing new lines of tension she hadn't noticed during their honeymoon. Is that why you keep your private life so private? Because of him? Gabriel's laugh held little humor, perceptive. Yes, partly. My father believed personal attachments were weaknesses to be exploited. He lived by that philosophy, and he made sure I understood the lessons. The insight into his psyche shifted something in Lila's perspective. Perhaps his secrecy wasn't about deceiving her, but about protecting a part of himself. He'd kept walled off from his public persona. I'm still angry, she said quietly. You have every right to be. But I also understand, I think. She turned to face him fully. You wanted to be just Gabriel, not Gabriel Hayes, billionaire CEO. His eyes softened as he looked at her. With you, I'm just Gabriel. That's what these past days have meant to me. Something in his expression, vulnerability beneath the powerful exterior, touched her deeply. Her anger hadn't disappeared, but it was now tempered by understanding. They had both been protecting parts of themselves, hiding behind facades born of past pain. Lila moved toward him slowly, each step a conscious choice to trust again, to meet him halfway. Show me, she whispered. Gabriel's brow furrowed in confusion. Show you what? That you're still the same man I married. That beneath the wealth and power, you're still my Gabrielle. She gestured to their opulent surroundings. Show me that all this doesn't change what's between us. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a heat that made her breath catch. The tension that had built between them, anger, hurt, desire, crackled in the air like electricity before a storm. In one fluid movement, he swept the contents of his desk to the floor, files and documents scattering across the expensive carpet. What are you? Before she could finish, Gabriel lifted her onto the cleared surface, his hands at her waist. Being the real me, he growled, his lips claiming hers in a kiss that obliterated thought. The polished wood was cool against her bare thighs. As Gabriel pushed her dress up, his hands reverent yet demanding on her skin. When he dropped to his knees before her, Lila gasped, fingers tangling in his hair as he worshipped her with his mouth until she cried out his name. Afterward, as they lay tangled together on the leather sofa across the room, Gabriel traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Still angry? He murmured against her hair. Lila laughed softly. Yes, but I'm working through it. "I look forward to further negotiations," he replied, his hand slipping down to the curve of her waist. As they dressed, retrieving scattered clothing from across the study, Lila realized that whatever complications Gabriel's identity brought to their marriage, the fundamental truth remained unchanged. The connection between them defied explanation or reason. Billionaire or not, Gabriel Hayes had claimed a place in her heart that no amount of anger could dislodge. Later that night, as she explored the mansion that was now her home, its art guild hallways, the indoor pool, the state-of-the-art kitchen where staff prepared meals she would never have to cook, Lila understood she had traded one life for another, stepping into a gilded cage of privilege and luxury. But as she entered their bedroom to find Gabriel waiting for her, his eyes warming at her appearance, she knew with sudden clarity this cage had been of her own choosing, and she held the key to its door. Chapter 5. Dangerous Desires. The velvet gown clung to Lila's curves like a second skin, its deep emerald color striking against her dark complexion. She studied her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing herself in the custom designer creation. A week into her new life as Mrs. Hayes, and she was still adjusting to the transformation. "You look breathtaking," Gabriel said from the doorway of their bedroom suite. Lila turned, her breath catching at the sight of him in his tuxedo. How was it possible that he became more handsome each time she saw him? "Nervous?" he asked, approaching to fasten a diamond necklace around her throat. "Terrified," she admitted. "This is my first public appearance as your wife. I don't want to embarrass you." Gabriel's fingers lingered on her skin. "Impossible," he murmured, pressing his lips to the sensitive spot behind her ear. "Just be yourself. That's the woman I married. A woman who still doesn't know which fork to use for the fish course," she reminded him. His low laugh vibrated against her neck. "Follow my lead and remember." His eyes met hers in the mirror, suddenly serious. "These people want something from me, not the other way around." The annual charity gala for the Hayes Foundation was, Gabriel had explained, the one society event he couldn't avoid. As they descended the mansion's grand staircase together, Lila drew strength from his steady presence beside her. Charles appeared at the bottom of the stairs. "The car is ready, sir, Mrs. Hayes." The older man's acceptance of her had been immediate and unquestioning, unlike some of the other staff who watched her with curious, sometimes skeptical eyes. "Thank you, Charles," Gabriel replied, then offering Lila his arm. "Ready to face the lions, wife?" She took a deep breath and nodded, slipping her hand through his arm. "Lead the way, husband." The ballroom was a glittering sea of wealth and privilege. The moment they entered, a palpable hush fell over the crowd before erupting into excited whispers. Gabriel Hayes, with a woman. Who is she? Did he say wife? Gabriel guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, introducing her to a blur of important names and faces. Lila maintained her composure, though she felt the weight of critical assessment in every glance, the calculation behind every smile. "You're doing wonderfully," Gabriel murmured as they moved between groups. "They're fascinated by you. They're trying to figure out what a man like you sees in someone like me," she replied quietly. His hand tightened possessively on her waist. "Let them wonder." As Gabriel was pulled into conversation with an elderly board member, Lila excused herself to visit the ladies' room. She was applying lipstick when the door opened, and a striking blonde entered, her ice blue gown emphasizing a model thin figure. "So," the woman said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you're Gabriel's latest distraction." Lila met the woman's gaze in the mirror. "I'm Gabriel's wife, actually." The blonde laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Wife? Aw, darling, that's adorable." She moved closer, her perfume expensive and cloying. "I'm Isabella Grant. Gabriel and I have history." "How nice for you," Lila replied evenly, though her heart hammered in her chest. Gabriel creditly. "I'll give Gabriel credit. You're certainly beautiful. But you're not his type. Trust me, I know what Gabriel likes." "And yet," Lila observed, turning to face her directly, "I'm the one wearing his ring." Something ugly flashed in Isabella's eyes. "For now." As the woman sauntered out, Lila steadied herself against the marble counter. This, she realized, was just the beginning of the challenges her new position would bring. When she returned to the ballroom, she found Gabriel scanning the crowd, tension visible in the set of his shoulders until he spotted her. He crossed to her immediately. "Everything all right?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "I just met Isabella Grant," Lila replied, watching his reaction carefully. A muscle twitched in Gabrielle's jaw. "I see. She seemed quite familiar with you." "Isabella and I dated briefly," he admitted. "It ended badly." "She implied it was more than brief," Lila pressed. Gabriel's eyes darkened. "Isabella has a talent for rewriting history to serve her purposes." He took Lila's hand, his thumb caressing her wedding band. "Whatever she told you." "She told me—" "I'm not your type," Lila interrupted. Something dangerous flickered in Gabriel's expression. Without warning, he pulled her closer, one hand splayed possessively across her lower back. "You want to know my type, Lila?" His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "My type is a woman who challenges me, who sees beyond the wealth and power to the man beneath, a woman who makes me forget everything but the taste of her skin." Before she could respond, his mouth captured hers, in a kiss that was both claiming and reverent. The ballroom around them faded away as Lila surrendered to the heat of his touch. When they finally broke apart, she became aware of the silence that had fallen over the nearby crowd. Isabella stood across the room, her face a rigid mask of fury. "I think," Gabriel said, satisfaction evident in his tone, "we've made our point." For the remainder of the evening, Gabriel kept her close, his hand rarely leaving the small of her back, a silent declaration of possession that thrilled her more than it should have. As they circulated, Lila began to notice the complex social dynamics at play. The men who deferred to Gabriel while eyeing her with speculation, the women who assessed her jewelry, her dress, her every word for signs of weakness. "They're trying to figure out if I married you for your money," she murmured to Gabriel during a quiet moment. "And if I married you for your body," he added with a wry smile. "People like these understand transactions, not connections. Is that what we have? A connection?" Gabriel's eyes found hers, their intensity making her breath catch. "You know we do." As the evening drew to a close, Lila found herself approached by a distinguished older woman with silver hair and knowing eyes that missed nothing. "You must be the mysterious Mrs. Hayes, who's caused such a stir," the woman said, extending a hand adorned with a single perfectly set emerald. "I'm Evelyn Thornton. I've served on the Hayes Foundation board since Gabriel was in short pants." Lila shook her hand, immediately drawn to the woman's directness. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thornton." "Evelyn, please. Mrs. Thornton makes me sound like someone's governess." Her shrewd eyes assessed Lila with interest, rather than the judgment she'd faced from others. "I must say, you're quite the surprise. I've known Gabriel since he was a boy," Evelyn said. "I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Lila glanced across the room to where Gabriel stood in conversation with several men in expensive suits. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, his expression softening when their eyes met. "I hope you don't mind an old woman's curiosity," Evelyn continued, "but your marriage seems rather sudden." "Sometimes you just know," Lila replied simply. Evelyn's laugh was surprisingly warm. "Indeed. My Harold proposed on our second date. Everyone said we were mad. We celebrated 50 years together before he passed." Before Lila could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Isabella Grant, clearly intoxicated, was gesturing wildly toward Lila. "Ask her." Isabella's voice carried across the ballroom. "Ask Gabriel's precious new wife where he found her. In a bar, drowning her sorrows over some other man." The crowd's reaction was immediate, horrified gasps and avid whispers. Lila felt heat rush to her face as dozens of eyes turned toward her. Before she could move, Gabriel was at her side, his arm protectively around her waist. "Isabella," he said, his voice calm but carrying a warning that made several nearby guests step back. "You're drunk. I suggest you leave before you embarrass yourself further." "Embarrass myself?" Isabella laughed bitterly. "You're the one who married a complete stranger. What's the matter, Gabriel? Tired of women who know your game?" Evelyn Thornton stepped forward, her elderly frame somehow imposing. "That's quite enough, Isabella. Security will escort you out." As two discreet security personnel appeared to lead a protesting Isabella away, Gabriel turned to Lila, concern etched on his features. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "We can leave if you want." Lila considered it for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. "No, I'm your wife. This is where I belong." Something like pride flashed in Gabriel's eyes. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles in a gesture that was both courtly and possessive. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur, but Lila was aware of a subtle shift in the room's energy. Where before she had been an oddity, an outlier, she now found herself treated with a new deference. Whether from respect for her composure during Isabella's outburst or from fear of Gabriel's evident devotion, she couldn't be sure. It was past midnight when they finally returned home, the mansion quiet and still. Lila kicked off her heels in the foyer, sighing with relief. "You were magnificent tonight," Gabriel said, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Even when your ex-girlfriend announced to everyone that you found me in a bar? Especially then." He moved closer, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. "You didn't flinch, didn't run." "I'm not ashamed of how we met," Lila replied. "Are you?" Instead of answering, Gabriel swept her into his arms, carrying her up the grand staircase toward their bedroom. "Let me show you exactly how I feel about my bar-found bride." In their room, he undressed her slowly, reverently, as if unwrapping a priceless gift. When she stood before him in nothing but the diamond necklace, his eyes darkened with desire. "You outshone every woman in that room tonight," he murmured, his fingers tracing the curve of her hip. "Do you have any idea what it did to me, watching you charm those stuffy board members? Seeing Isabella's face when she realized she couldn't touch what we have." Lila reached for him, unfastening his tie with trembling fingers. "Show me!" What followed was unlike anything they'd shared before. A claiming, a possession, a devotion expressed in the language of touch and taste. Gabriel worshipped her body with a thoroughness that left her sobbing his name, his whispered praises against her skin like prayers. Later, as they lay tangled in silk sheets, Lila traced idle patterns on Gabriel's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Isabella won't be the last, will she?" she asked softly. "The last person from your past who tries to come between us?" Gabriel's arm tightened around her. "No, but they'll all fail, just as she did. How can you be so sure?" He tilted her face up to his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "Because what I feel for you terrifies me, Lila. I've spent my life avoiding this weakness, this need, and now that I've found you, I won't let anyone take it away." The raw honesty in his voice stole her breath. This was not the smooth, controlled billionaire the world knew. This was her Gabriel, passionate, possessive, and unexpectedly vulnerable. "I'm falling for you," she confessed, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but—" His kiss silenced her, deep and consuming, a physical manifestation of the emotions swirling between them. "Not crazy," he murmured against her lips. "Inevitable." As dawn broke over the city, bathing their room in golden light, Lila watched Gabriel sleep, his features softened, the weight of his public persona temporarily set aside. She realized with startling clarity that somewhere between that first night at the bar and this moment, her impulsive marriage had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. A connection that ran so deep, dangerous in its intensity and thrilling in its potential. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Isabella's hostility, society's judgment, the secrets Gabriel still kept locked away, they would face them together. For now, in the sanctuary of their shared bed, that was enough. Chapter 6. Poisonous Reunion. Rain pattered against the windows of Gabriel's favorite restaurant, an exclusive place tucked away in the corner of the city where privacy was guaranteed. 3 weeks into their marriage, they had established a fragile routine, finding their rhythm as a couple while Lila adjusted to her new role. "To 1 month of impulsive decisions," Gabriel toasted, raising his wine glass. Lila clinked her glass against his. "Has it really only been a month?" 32 days since I saw you walk into that hotel bar," he confirmed, his eyes warming with the memory. "Best night of my life." "Even though I was a mess," she teased. "You were magnificent," he corrected, wounded but unbroken. The sincerity in his voice made her blush. She was about to respond when her gaze caught on a familiar figure entering the restaurant and the words died in her throat. Gabriel noticed her sudden tension. "What is it?" Unable to speak, Lila simply nodded toward the maitre d's station, where Ethan now stood, accompanied by a woman who wasn't Sophia. Her ex-fiancé was scanning the restaurant, and when his eyes landed on her, shock registered on his features before being replaced by something calculating. "Leela." Gabriel's voice held a note of concern. "It's Ethan," she whispered. "My ex." Gabriel's expression darkened instantly. He reached across the table to take her hand, his thumb brushing soothingly across her knuckles. "Do you want to leave?" Before she could answer, Ethan was approaching their table, his companion trailing behind, looking confused. "Lila," Ethan said, his voice laced with false warmth. "What an incredible coincidence." "I doubt that," she replied coolly, drawing strength from Gabriel's steady presence. Ethan's gaze shifted to Gabriel, then to their clasped hands and the wedding rings that glinted in the restaurant's soft lighting. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" Lila felt Gabriel's hand tighten almost imperceptibly around hers. "Ethan, this is Gabriel Hayes, my husband." She took grim satisfaction in watching Ethan's expression cycle rapidly through disbelief, recognition, and calculation. Of course, he would know the Hayes name. Husband. Ethan's laugh held an edge of disbelief. "It's been what, a month since our engagement?" 32 days, Gabriel interjected smoothly, his tone pleasant but his eyes cold. "And you are?" "Ethan Carter," he replied, extending a hand that Gabriel briefly shook. "Lila and I were engaged until recently." "Yes," Gabriel said with deceptive mildness. "I believe you were otherwise occupied at your engagement party with her best friend, if I recall correctly." Ethan had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That was a misunderstanding." "Was it?" Leela found her voice, anger giving her courage. "Because it seemed pretty clear to me." An awkward silence fell, broken when Ethan's forgotten date cleared her throat. "Oh," Ethan said, startled. "This is Emma." The woman nodded politely, clearly sensing the tension. "Join us," Gabriel said suddenly, gesturing to the empty chairs at their table. Lila shot him a surprised look, which he answered with a subtle squeeze of her hand. "Or we wouldn't want to interrupt," Ethan protested weakly, though his eyes betrayed his interest in prolonging the encounter. "I insist," Gabriel replied, his tone making it clear it wasn't a request. Moments later, they were settled into an excruciating facsimile of a friendly dinner. Gabriel ordered champagne with the ease of a man accustomed to commanding any room he entered. "So, Ethan," Gabriel began once drinks were served, "what is it that you do?" "Investment banking," Ethan replied, his chest puffing slightly. "Junior partner at Sterling and Brooks." "Ah." Gabriel nodded, taking a sip of his champagne. "A small firm, aren't they?" Lila caught the slight stiffening in Ethan's posture. Sterling and Brooks was one of the city's most prestigious boutique investment banks, but clearly minuscule compared to Hayes Enterprises. "They're quite selective," Ethan said defensively. Gabriel merely smiled. "I'm sure." Throughout the appetizers, Ethan attempted to steer the conversation to safe topics, but Gabriel consistently brought it back to Ethan's career, his ambitions, his family connections, each question revealing how thoroughly Gabriel had investigated him. "It's almost as if you've been looking into me, Mr. Hayes," Ethan observed finally, his expression uneasy. "Gabriel, please," he corrected. "And yes, I make it a point to know everything about the man who broke my wife's heart." The table fell silent. Emma looked desperately uncomfortable, while Ethan's face flushed with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. "That's ancient history," Ethan insisted, glancing at Lila. "And clearly, Lila has moved on spectacularly well." "Have I?" Lila challenged, emboldened by Gabriel's protective presence. "Or did you track me down deliberately tonight?" Ethan had the audacity to look wounded. "It was genuinely a coincidence, but seeing you—" He hesitated, glancing apologetically at his date. "Lila, I've regretted what happened every day since. It was the biggest mistake of my life." Lila felt Gabriel go very still beside her. "What exactly are you saying, Ethan?" she asked, her heart suddenly pounding. "I'm saying I miss you." Ethan's voice dropped to an earnest whisper. "This whirlwind marriage, it's not you, Lila. We had 2 years together. You can't tell me you've forgotten everything we shared." Before she could respond, Gabriel's voice cut through the tension, deceptively casual. "Tell me, Ethan, how's Sophia these days?" The question seemed to catch Ethan off guard. "What?" "Sophia," Gabriel repeated. "Lila's former best friend. The woman I believe you were intimately involved with on the night of your engagement party. I'm curious about her current status." Ethan's expression shuddered, I haven't spoken to her in weeks." "Really?" Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting, considering you were seen having lunch with her just yesterday at the Plaza Hotel." Lila's head snapped toward Ethan, who had gone pale. "How did you—" Ethan began, then stopped abruptly. "I make it my business to know when people might pose a threat to my wife's happiness," Pedro replied, all pretense of cordiality gone from his voice. "Including when her ex-fiancé coordinates with her former best friend to engineer a coincidental meeting where he can play the repentant lover." "That's not—" Ethan protested, but Gabrielle cut him off. "It wasn't until my investigation into your recent financial difficulties that I understood your sudden renewed interest in Lila." Gabriel's voice remained conversational, but his eyes had turned cold. "Sterling and Brooks is on the verge of collapse after that failed merger with Horizon Financial, isn't it? Just last week they announced another round of partner demotions." Ethan's jaw tightened, confirming Gabriel's information was accurate. "And then," Gabriel continued, "through that poker game with Daniel Kensington, your former roommate who now works for my acquisitions department, you learned that your ex-fiancé had married me?" His smile was predatory. "Did you think she might be your ticket back to solvency? A way to connect to Hayes Enterprises through the wife you so carelessly discarded?" The blood drained from Ethan's face, his expression confirming every word of Gabriel's accusations. "You orchestrated this whole meeting," Lila realized, disgust washing through her. "You're still using me." Emma stood abruptly, gathering her purse. "I think I should leave," she said, her voice tight with embarrassment. "Ethan, don't bother calling me again." She turned to Lila and Gabriel. "I'm sorry about this. I had no idea what I was being dragged into." After she left, Ethan dropped all pretense. "Fine," he snapped, his carefully maintained charm evaporating. "Yes, I knew Lila would be here tonight. One of the waitstaff from your regular restaurant is a college friend who mentioned your standing reservation." His expression hardened. "And yes, I've been having some financial setbacks, but that doesn't mean my feelings for you aren't real, Lila." "Your feelings for what I can do for you, you mean?" she replied coldly. "You can't possibly love him," Ethan argued, gesturing toward Gabriel. "You barely know him. This is clearly a rebound marriage that you'll regret once the initial attraction wears off." Gabriel's hand moved to Lila's thigh under the table, a grounding touch that steadied her against Ethan's desperate accusations. The warmth of his palm reminded her of all they'd shared, not just physical passion, but trust, honesty, and growing love. "The difference between you and Gabriel," she said quietly, meeting Ethan's gaze without flinching, "is that he saw me at my worst, betrayed, humiliated, broken, and still wanted me. You saw me at my best for 2 years, and it wasn't enough to keep you faithful. He's using you too," Ethan insisted desperately. "A man like Gabriel Hayes doesn't marry a random woman from a bar without an agenda." "Enough." Gabriel's voice was soft but carried such authority that Ethan immediately fell silent. "You've overstayed your welcome. This is the last time you will approach my wife. If you attempt to contact her again, you'll find employment opportunities in this city suddenly very limited." Ethan's face flushed with anger. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all," Gabriel replied calmly, though Lila could feel the controlled tension in his body. "Merely stating a fact. Now, I believe you were leaving." For a moment Ethan looked as if he might argue further, but something in Gabriel's expression, a flash of the ruthless businessman beneath the controlled exterior, must have convinced him otherwise. He stood, throwing his napkin on the table with poorly disguised frustration. "You've changed, Lila," he said, his tone bitter. "You're not the woman I knew." "Thank God for that," she replied evenly, maintaining her composure despite the storm of emotions beneath the surface. After Ethan stormed out, a silence settled between them. The restaurant's soft lighting cast intimate shadows across their table, creating a private world amid the quiet murmur of other diners. Gabriel signaled discreetly for the check, his expression unreadable. "You had him investigated," Lila said finally, studying Gabriel's profile as the city lights flashed past their car windows. "Yes." His answer was simple, unapologetic. "How long have you been watching him?" She kept her tone neutral, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Gabriel turned to her, his eyes steady. "Since the night you told me about him. I make it a point to understand potential threats." "You considered my ex-fiancé a threat?" The concept was both surprising and oddly flattering. "I considered anyone who hurt you a person of interest." His hand found hers in the darkness of the car, his touch warm and reassuring. When his financial troubles began and he started making inquiries about you, that interest became active surveillance. The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed her, but instead it sent a thrill down her spine. When did you know he would be here tonight? My security team notified me when he made the reservation this afternoon. I considered having our dinner moved elsewhere, but decided you deserved the chance to confront your past on your terms. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Was I wrong? Lila considered the question carefully. No, I needed that closure. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for letting me handle it my way while providing backup. His lips quirked in a half smile. Exactly. The drive home was charged with unspoken tension. As their car wound through the city streets, Gabriel's hand rested on her thigh, his touch both possessive and questioning. When they reached the mansion, Lila didn't wait for Charles to open the door. 2 healing agents. She slipped out of the car and headed straight for the house, aware of Gabriel following close behind. The moment the front door closed behind them, she turned to him. Did you mean what you said about protecting what's yours? Something dangerous flashed in Gabriel's eyes. Every word. Show me, she challenged, her voice barely above a whisper. In an instant, he had her pressed against the wall of the foyer, his mouth claiming hers in a kiss that was pure possession. Lila melted against him, her anger at Ethan's manipulation transforming into a desperate need to affirm what she had found with Gabriel. Mine, he growled against her throat, his hand sliding down to grip her hips. Yours, she agreed breathlessly, her fingers tangling in his hair as she pulled him closer. They didn't make it to the bedroom. Gabriel lifted her against the wall, her legs wrapping around his waist as he claimed her with an intensity that left them both gasping. Each touch, each kiss was a declaration, an exorcism of the past and an affirmation of the present. Later, as they lay tangled together in their bed, Gabriel traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder. I should be furious that you investigated Ethan without telling me, Lila murmured, her head resting on his chest. Are you? His voice rumbled beneath her ear. She considered the question. No, oddly enough, I'm not. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. It's strange. With Ethan, I would have seen it as controlling. With you. With you? With you? He prompted when she hesitated. With you, it feels like protection. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertip. That should probably worry me more than it does. Gabriel caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I won't apologize for wanting to shield you from pain, Lila, but I promise never to make decisions for you. In the amber glow of the bedside lamp, Lila studied the face of the man she'd impulsively married. The sharp angles of his cheekbones, the intensity of his gaze, the curve of his lips that could shift from commanding to tender in an instant. Thank you for being there tonight, she whispered, for letting me face him on my terms. Gabriel's arms tightened around her. I'll always be there, Lila, for as long as you want me. As he drifted toward sleep in the warmth of his embrace, Lila realized that her feelings for Gabrielle had evolved far beyond the initial attraction, beyond even the passionate connection that had drawn them together. Somewhere in the whirlwind of the past month, she had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with her husband. And that, she knew with sudden clarity, was the most terrifying realization of all. Chapter 7. Souls Bared. Pack for cold weather, Gabriel had told her that morning, a rare playfulness dancing in his eyes. We leave in 2 hours. Now, as their helicopter descended toward a stunning modern structure nestled among snow-dusted pines, Lila pressed her face to the window in wonder. Below them, a mountain retreat emerged from the wilderness, all glass and stone, somehow both imposing and perfectly harmonious with its surroundings. Another one of your properties you neglected to mention? She teased, as the helicopter touched down on a private landing pad. Gabriel's smile held a touch of vulnerability she rarely saw. This one's different. I designed it myself. You designed this? Lila's respect deepened as they exited the helicopter, the crisp mountain air filling her lungs. Architecture was my first love, Gabriel admitted, guiding her toward the entrance with his hand at the small of her back. Before my father convinced me that business was the only acceptable path for a haze, the revelation, this glimpse into the man he might have been, touched something deep in Lila's heart. 6 weeks into their marriage, Gabriel was slowly revealing layers of himself that she suspected few people ever saw. Inside, the retreat was a masterpiece of understated luxury, soaring ceilings, walls of glass that framed breathtaking mountain views, and a massive stone fireplace already crackling with warmth. "The staff has prepared everything," Gabriel explained, leading her through the main living area. "They've returned to the village for the weekend. We're completely alone." The intimacy of his statement hung in the air between them. Completely alone. No household staff, no business calls, no social obligations. Just the two of them in this secluded paradise. "It's beautiful," Leela said softly, trailing her fingers along a smooth wooden countertop. "How often do you come here?" "Not often enough." Gabriel moved to pour them each a glass of wine from a bottle that had been left breathing. "This is my sanctuary, where I come when I need to remember who I am beyond the Hayes name." "And who is that?" she asked, accepting the glass he offered. His eyes met hers over the rim of his glass. "That's what I'm still figuring out." Later, after a dinner they prepared together in the gourmet kitchen, they settled before the massive fireplace. Outside, snow had begun to fall, delicate flakes swirling against the darkness beyond the windows. "This feels like another world," Lila observed, curled against Gabriel's side on the oversized sofa. "Like we're the only two people who exist." "That was the idea." His fingers trailed lazily up and down her arm. "No distractions, no past, no future, just this moment." But the past was never truly gone, Lila knew. It lingered in the shadows of their conversations, in the questions they still hadn't asked each other. "Tell me about her," she said softly, feeling Gabriel tense beside her. "About who?" His voice was carefully neutral. "The woman who hurt you." Lila shifted to look at him. "I know there was someone. I can see it in your eyes sometimes when you think I'm not looking." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Just as Lila began to think he wouldn't answer, Gabriel's voice emerged, low and controlled. Her name was Charlotte. He stared into the flames, his posture rigid despite his casual position on the sofa. Charlotte Vaughn. Lila remained quiet, giving him space to continue at his own pace. She sensed this was a story he rarely shared, perhaps had never shared completely with anyone. "We met at Stanford. I was finishing my MBA and she was in the law program. She was extraordinary, brilliant, ambitious, with this uncanny ability to see solutions where everyone else saw only problems." A faint smile touched his lips before fading. "We were together for 3 years, engaged for 1. Lila's heart constricted at the pain evident in his voice. "What happened?" Gabriel took a long swallow of his wine, his throat working as he prepared to excavate memories he'd clearly buried deep. "After my father died suddenly, I was thrust into running Hayes Enterprises before I felt ready. Charlotte became my rock. I trusted her completely, made her my closest advisor, gave her access to everything, my home, my accounts, my most confidential business strategy." He set down his glass with careful precision, his fingers lingering on the stem. "What I didn't know was that she was working with my brother the entire time." "Your brother?" This was the first Gabriel had mentioned of any siblings. "Nathan," Gabriel's voice hardened. "My father's son from his first marriage. He's 15 years older than me and never forgave my mother for replacing his own. When my father named me his successor instead of Nathan, his resentment turned to outright hatred. And Charlotte," he paused, his jaw tightening. "She was his instrument of revenge." The firelight cast shadows across Gabriel's face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. "They orchestrated a hostile takeover attempt using information she'd gathered during our relationship. She betrayed not just my trust, but my heart." Lila could barely breathe past the ache in her chest. "How did you find out?" "I overheard them." Gabriel's laugh held no humor. "Classic, isn't it? I returned early from a business trip, hoping to surprise her. Instead, I heard them discussing their plans and their relationship. They'd been lovers the entire time she was with me. The parallels to her own betrayal by Ethan and Sophia weren't lost on Lila. No wonder Gabriel had understood her pain so completely that first night. "What did you do?" she asked, softly. "I confronted them. Nathan was unapologetic, said it was what I deserved for stealing our father's company from him." Gabriel's voice remained steady, but Lila could feel the tension radiating from his body. "Charlotte tried to deny it at first, then claimed she'd fallen in love with Nathan during their conspiracy, that what we had was never real." That's why you keep your personal life so private, Lila realized. Why you were so guarded even with me at first. Gabriel nodded slowly. After Charlotte, I shut that part of myself away, focused entirely on business, trusted no one. His eyes found hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. Until you. The weight of his confession settled between them, not just the facts of his betrayal, but what it meant that he'd shared this with her, that he'd allowed himself to be vulnerable again. The night we met, he continued, his voice softer now, I recognized something in you. A reflection of my own pain, perhaps, but also a strength I'd forgotten existed. Lila reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. Is that why you proposed? Because you saw yourself in me? Partly, he admitted, but there was more. Something about you called to me in a way I couldn't explain, still can't explain. For the first time in 5 years, I wanted to take a risk on someone. That was quite a risk, she observed with a small smile. Marrying a complete stranger. The best decision I've ever made. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Even if it terrifies me sometimes. It terrifies you? This admission surprised her. Gabriel always seemed so certain, so in control. Every day, his eyes held hers, unflinching in their honesty. Because with each passing day, I find myself caring more, needing you more, and that kind of dependence is frightening. She finished for him, because it gives me the power to hurt you. Yes. The single word contained volumes. Lila moved closer, framing his face with her hands. I would never betray you, Gabrielle. Not like that. Not ever. I believe you, he whispered, and she could see that he meant it. That's what scares me most of all. Their kiss was different from the passionate embraces they usually shared. Deeper, more vulnerable, laden with unspoken emotion. When they finally broke apart, Lila rested her forehead against his. I love you, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could consider their weight. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I love you. For a heartbeat, Gabriel went completely still. Then his arms tightened around her, crushing her against his chest as if he feared she might disappear. Say it again, he requested, his voice rough with emotion. Oh, I love you, Gabriel Hayes. The words grew stronger with repetition. I love your strength and your vulnerability, your protection and your trust. I love the man you are beneath all the wealth and power. When he pulled back to look at her, Lila was stunned to see tears shining in his eyes. In all their time together, she had never seen Gabriel cry. I've been falling in love with you since the moment you walked into that bar, he confessed, his voice unsteady. Fighting it every step of the way because I was terrified of feeling this much again. His thumb brushed her cheek. I love you, Lila. God help me, I love you more than I thought possible. The declaration broke something open between them. A final wall neither had realized still stood. Their lovemaking that night was unlike anything they'd shared before. Tender yet passionate, each touch an affirmation of the feelings they'd finally voiced aloud. As snowflakes continued to fall beyond the windows, blanketing the world in pristine white, they lay tangled together before the dying fire. Gabriel's fingers traced idle patterns on her bare skin, his touch both reverent and possessive. What happens now? Lila asked softly, her head resting on his chest, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. Now, Gabriel replied, pressing a kiss to her temple, we build something real from this impulsive beginning, something that lasts. Outside, the storm intensified, wind howling around the secluded retreat, but within its walls, wrapped in each other's arms, they had found a sanctuary neither had believed possible, a love born from betrayal and impulse that had somehow transformed into their greatest truth. I never expected you, Gabriel murmured, as sleep began to claim them both. Never expected this. Neither did I, Lila whispered back, curling closer to his warmth. But now, I can't imagine any other path. As they drifted towards sleep, the fire burning down to embers, Lila realized that their unconventional beginning, the chance meeting, the impulsive marriage, had led them exactly where they were meant to be. In finding each other, they had found themselves, and whatever challenges awaited them beyond this mountain sanctuary, they would face them together, no longer strangers bound by convenience, but partners united by love. Chapter 8. Ecstatic Surprise. 3 weeks after their return from the mountain retreat, Leela stood in the master bathroom of their mansion, staring at the plastic stick in her trembling hand. 2 pink lines stared back at her, unmistakable in their meaning. "This can't be right," she whispered to her reflection, counting backward in her head. They'd been careful, mostly, but there had been that first night in his penthouse. And then the passionate reunion after Ethan's appearance. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She and Gabrielle had never discussed children. Their whirlwind romance had left little time for conversations about the future, and even after their declarations of love at the mountain retreat, they'd been content to live in the present, savoring each day as it came. But a baby changed everything. Lila pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, trying to comprehend the reality that a new life was growing inside her. Their child, hers and Gabrielle's, created from their unexpected love. The sound of the bedroom door opening jolted her back to the present. She quickly wrapped the pregnancy test in tissue and tucked it into the pocket of her robe. "Lila?" Gabriel's voice called from the bedroom. "Are you all right? Charles said you weren't feeling well." Taking a deep breath, she opened the bathroom door. Gabriel stood by the bed, concern etched on his features. He'd clearly come straight from the office, still in his immaculate suit despite the late hour. "I'm fine," she assured him, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly, seeing through her pretense as he always did. He crossed to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're pale, and you've barely eaten for days." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Tell me what's wrong." She opened her mouth to deflect again, but the words wouldn't come. This wasn't something she could, or should, hide from him. "I need to tell you something," she said instead, leading him to sit on the edge of their bed. "Something important." Alarm flashed across his face. "Are you unhappy? Is it something I've done?" "No, nothing like that." She took his hands in hers, drawing strength from their warmth. "It's just unexpected." Gabriel waited, giving her the space to find her words, one of the many things she loved about him. "Oh, I'm pregnant," she finally said, the words hanging in the air between them. Gabriel went completely still, his expression frozen in shock. "Pregnant?" he repeated, as if testing the word. Lila nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I just confirmed it. I've been feeling strange for days, but I didn't want to say anything until I was sure." "A baby?" he whispered, his eyes dropping to her stomach. "Our baby?" "I know we never discussed this," she rushed on, anxiety making her words tumble over each other. "It wasn't planned. If you're not ready, if this isn't what you want—" Her words cut off abruptly as Gabriel slid from the bed to his knees before her, his hands cradling her face with infinite tenderness. "Not what I want?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Lila, you've already given me more than I ever dreamed possible. And now this?" His voice broke as he pressed his forehead against hers. "A family. Our family." Relief washed through her, followed immediately by a wave of love so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. "You're happy about this?" In answer, Gabriel gently pushed her robe aside and pressed his lips to her stomach in a kiss of such reverence that Lila felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I have never been happier in my life," he whispered against her skin. When he looked up at her, his eyes shone with unshed tears. "Thank you for this gift." Lila pulled him up beside her on the bed, overcome by the depth of his reaction. They held each other in silence for long moments, the magnitude of their news creating a bubble of wonder around them. "I was so afraid to tell you," she admitted finally. "We've only known each other for such a short time. A baby is such a huge step." Gabrielle laughed softly. "We've never done anything in the conventional order, have we? Marriage first, falling in love second, and now a baby? Do you think we're crazy?" she asked, only half joking. "Definitely." His smile was radiant, but I wouldn't change a thing. The days that followed were filled with secret joy as they kept the news between themselves, savoring this private miracle before sharing it with the world. Gabrielle became even more attentive, if such a thing were possible, insisting on the finest in prenatal care, researching organic food options, and treating Lila with a tenderness that both touched and amused her. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she protested one evening when he insisted on carrying her up the stairs after a long day. "Humor me," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. I've waited my entire life for this. For you. For us." 2 weeks after they discovered the pregnancy, they sat in a private examining room at the city's most exclusive obstetrics practice. Leela lay on the examination table, Gabriel's hand firmly clasped in hers as the ultrasound technician prepared the equipment. "This gel might feel cold," the technician warned before applying it to Leela's exposed abdomen. Gabriel watched every movement with intense focus, his thumb tracing soothing circles on the back of Leela's hand. The anticipation in his expression made her heart swell with love. As the technician pressed the wand to her stomach and began moving it in practiced patterns, Lila fixed her eyes on the screen, eager for that first glimpse of their child. The technician paused, frowning slightly as she adjusted the wand's position. "Is something wrong?" Gabriel asked immediately, tension radiating from him. "Not at all," the technician replied, a smile spreading across her face. "But I think we need the doctor for this. Excuse me for a moment." She left the room, leaving Lila and Gabriel to exchange worried glances. "What do you think that means?" Lila whispered, anxiety creeping into her voice. Gabriel brought her hand to his lips. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." The door opened to admit Dr. Harper, a distinguished woman with kind eyes and an air of calm competence. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," she greeted them warmly. "I understand we have something interesting to see on the ultrasound." She took over from the technician, studying the screen with practiced eyes as she moved the wand across Lila's abdomen. After a moment, she smiled broadly. "Well, this explains your particularly severe morning sickness, Mrs. Hayes." She turned the screen so they could see it better. "Congratulations, you're having triplets." The world seemed to tilt beneath Lila. "Triplets," she repeated faintly. "3 babies." "3 healthy babies, from what I can see," Dr. Harper confirmed, pointing to the screen. "Here, here, and here, each with their own strong heartbeat." Gabriel made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. His grip on Lila's hand tightened as he stared at the screen in wonder. "3 babies," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "We're having 3 babies." The drive home passed in a daze of shock and exhilaration. "Triplets!" The word kept repeating in Lila's mind, impossible, yet thrillingly real. "Are you all right?" Gabriel asked as they entered the mansion, his arm protectively around her waist. "You've been quiet." Lila looked up at him, finally finding her voice. "I'm terrified," she admitted. 1 baby seemed overwhelming enough, but 3? Instead of the reassurance she expected, Gabriel nodded in understanding. "They're terrified too," he confessed, guiding her to sit beside him on the sofa. "This is all happening so fast. Sometimes I worry that I'm dreaming, that I'll wake up and find myself back in my old life, alone." The vulnerability in his admission touched her deeply. Lila leaned into him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Not a dream," she assured him. "Just a miracle." 3 miracles, apparently. His hand found its way to her stomach, resting there with gentle reverence. "Our family," he murmured, wonder infusing his voice. "Already larger than I ever imagined." That night, as they lay together in their bedroom, Gabriel's arm curled protectively around her, Lila found herself thinking of how far they'd come in such a short time. From strangers meeting in a bar to expectant parents of triplets in just over 3 months. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked softly, his breath warm against her neck. "How unpredictable life is," she replied, threading her fingers through his. "If Ethan hadn't betrayed me that night, if I hadn't chosen that particular bar to drown my sorrows, if I hadn't decided to have a drink alone instead of attending that charity gala," Gabriel added, completing the chain of coincidences that had brought them together. "Do you believe in fate?" Lila asked, turning in his arms to face him. In the soft glow of the bedside lamp, Gabriel's expression was thoughtful. "I never did before," he admitted. "I believed in planning, in control, in making my own destiny." His hand caressed the gentle curve of her stomach. "But this, us, these babies, feels like something beyond my control, something meant to be, even though it's happening so fast, especially because it's happening so fast." His smile held a touch of wonder. "Some people search their entire lives for what we found in an instant." The weeks that followed brought rapid changes as Lila's pregnancy progressed, her body transforming more quickly than either of them expected. The triplets making their presence known in an unmistakable baby bump by the beginning of her 2nd trimester. Gabriel insisted on converting an entire wing of the mansion into a nursery suite, consulting with the best designers who specialized in multiples. He attended every doctor's appointment, absorbing each piece of information with the same intensity he brought to his business dealings. One evening, Layla found him in the newly completed nursery, standing alone in the center of the room, staring at the 3 identical cribs arranged along one wall. "Gabriel," she called softly from the doorway, "are you okay?" He turned to her, his expression unusually vulnerable. "I was just thinking about my own father," he said, "about the kind of parent he was, distant, demanding, critical." His hands flexed at his sides. "I don't want to be that kind of father." Lila crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "You won't be," she assured him. "You're nothing like him." "How can you be sure?" Doubt clouded his features. "The Hayes legacy isn't exactly filled with nurturing figures." "Because I know you," she said simply. "I've seen your heart, Gabriel. The way you love, fiercely, completely, protectively. That's the kind of father you'll be." His arms encircled her, drawing her as close as her growing belly would allow. "How would they ever deserve you?" he whispered against her hair. "By being exactly who you are," she replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him softly. "The man I love." The weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations and prenatal appointments. Their high-risk pregnancy specialist, Dr. Harper, monitored the triplets' development with vigilant care, explaining each milestone as 3 distinct heartbeats pulsed through the ultrasound speakers. At their 20-week anatomy scan, they watched in awe as Dr. Harper carefully examined each baby, confirming their development was on track, despite the challenges of a multiple pregnancy. "Would you like to know the sexes?" Dr. Harper asked, her experienced hands moving the ultrasound wand with precision. They exchanged a glance and nodded in unison. "Well, Baby A is definitely a boy," she announced, pointing to the screen. "And Baby B is also a boy." She moved the wand to focus on the 3rd child. "And Baby C is a girl. Congratulations, you have 2 sons and a daughter." Gabriel emerged from the appointment looking dazed with happiness. "A daughter," he kept saying as they drove home, the word filled with wonder. "I'm going to have a daughter." Layla watched him with amusement. "And 2 sons," she reminded him gently. "Yes, of course," he grinned, slightly sheepish. "The boys will be amazing, but a little girl. She'll be as beautiful as her mother." That night, Gabriel received a call that caused him to abruptly leave their evening routine. His expression transformed instantly from relaxed to alert, the business mask sliding into place as he answered his phone with a clipped "Hayes." After disappearing into his study for over an hour, he finally returned to their bedroom, the tension radiating from him palpable, etched in the tight set of his shoulders and the crease between his brows. "What is it?" Lila asked, setting aside the pregnancy book she'd been reading, her hand instinctively protective over her growing belly. Gabriel sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a habit she'd noticed emerged when he was processing difficult information. "That was Marcus from my security team," he said, his voice tight with controlled concern. "There's been a situation." Alarm flashed through her. "What kind of situation?" "Nothing for you to worry about," he assured her quickly, but the shadow in his eyes betrayed him. "Just some unusual activity around one of my subsidiary companies. Probably nothing significant." But Lila could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he was choosing his words. "Don't do that," she said quietly. "Don't try to protect me from the truth." Gabriel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. I'm sorry." He met her eyes directly. "There have been some coordinated attempts to access sensitive financial information. My team believes someone may be gathering intelligence for a hostile move against Hayes Enterprises. Your brother?" she guessed, remembering the story Gabriel had told her in the mountain retreat. "Possibly. Nathan has been quiet for years, but this has his signature." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "He always did have excellent timing." "What does that mean?" "It means that with you pregnant with triplets, I'm more vulnerable than I've ever been." He placed his hand on her rounded belly, his touch gentle despite the steel in his voice. "Nathan knows that attacking now, when my focus is divided, gives him an advantage." Concern tightened around Lila's heart. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes to protect what matters." Gabriel's expression softened as he looked at her. "And that's you and our children. The company is important, but it's just business. You're my life." The depth of emotion in his words brought tears to her eyes. Hormones, she told herself, even as she recognized the truth of what he was saying. In just a few months, Gabriel Hayes, the ruthless businessman, the solitary billionaire, had transformed into a man who put family above all else. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Gabriel's protective arm around her, Lila marveled at how completely their impulsive beginning had evolved into something profound and lasting. Whatever threats loomed on the horizon, whether from Gabriel's brother or the challenges of becoming parents to triplets, they would face them together, bound by a love neither had been looking for, but both had desperately needed. In the darkness of their bedroom, Gabriel's hand rested protectively over the swell of her stomach, as if physically shielding their unborn children from the world's dangers. Lila covered his hand with her own, feeling one of the babies kick against their joined palms. "They know you're there," she whispered, her heart full. "They already know their father is watching over them." Gabriel's breath caught audibly. "I'll always protect them," he vowed, his voice rough with emotion. "All of you, with everything I am." As sleep claimed her, Lila's last conscious thought was of how strangely perfect their unconventional journey had been, how a night of heartbreak had led her to the greatest love she could have imagined, and soon to the family she had always dreamed of, but never quite believed she would have. Chapter 9. Love Under Fire. The mansion had become a fortress. As Lila's pregnancy progressed into its 7th month, Gabriel had transformed their home into an impenetrable sanctuary. The threats from his brother Nathan had escalated from vague corporate maneuvering to increasingly personal attacks. First a data breach, targeting their private financial information. Then an attempted infiltration of their home security system. Gabriel's response had been swift and comprehensive. Elite security personnel now patrolled the perimeter day and night. State-of-the-art systems monitored every approach to the property. Bulletproof glass had been installed on all ground-floor windows. Even their trusted staff underwent enhanced background checks. Meanwhile, Lila's body waged its own battle. The pregnancy with triplets had become increasingly difficult, her petite frame struggling to support 3 growing babies. At 30 weeks, Dr. Harper had ordered strict bed rest, a necessary precaution that felt like imprisonment despite the luxury of her surroundings. "You should go to the office," Lila insisted one morning, watching Gabriel set up his laptop beside her bed for the 3rd consecutive day. "I have nurses here. The doctor visits daily. You don't need to watch me sleep." Gabriel's smile was tender as he brushed a curl from her forehead. "There's nothing more important than being here." His hand rested on her dramatically swollen belly. "The company will survive without me for a few hours." As if responding to their father's voice, one of the babies kicked forcefully against his palm. Gabriel's face transformed with wonder, an expression Lila never tired of seeing. "Besides," he added, "Charles is bringing the contracts that need my immediate attention. Everything else can wait." Lila sighed, relenting. In truth, she was grateful for his presence. The enormous bed felt less like a prison with Gabriel beside her, his strong hands massaging her aching back, his voice reading aloud when her eyes grew too tired for books. Dr. Harper had been clear during yesterday's examination. These babies could come any day now. 32 weeks with triplets is considered full term. The nursery was ready. A marvel of organization with 3 of everything arranged with military precision. 3 Moses baskets, 3 cribs with identical mobiles, 3 dressers filled with tiny clothes organized by size. The hospital bags were packed. The staff was prepared. All they needed now were the babies themselves. That evening, Gabriel reluctantly agreed to attend an emergency board meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. 2 hours, he promised, pressing a kiss to Lila's forehead. 3 at most. Charles and the nurses will be here, and I'm only 20 minutes away. "Go," she urged him, touched by his concern but aware of his responsibilities. "We'll be fine." The storm began shortly after Gabriel left, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rolled across the sky. Lila tried to read, but restlessness plagued her. An unfamiliar tightness wrapped around her abdomen, coming and going in waves that gradually increased in intensity. When she felt a rush of warm liquid between her thighs, realization dawned with crystal clarity. "Charles," she called, pressing the intercom button beside her bed. When no response came, she tried again, panic edging into her voice. "Charles? Anyone?" The mansion's power flickered once, twice, then plunged into darkness. The backup generator should have engaged immediately, but the seconds stretched into a minute of complete darkness. Something was wrong. Fumbling for her phone on the nightstand, Lila dialed Gabriel's number. The call failed to connect. She tried again with the same result, her anxiety mounting as another contraction gripped her, stronger than before. A flash of lightning illuminated the bedroom, followed by a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. In that brief illumination, Lila glimpsed a figure in the doorway. "Who's there?" she called, fear sharpening her voice. "Charles?" Not quite. The unfamiliar male voice sent ice through her veins. But family nonetheless. The emergency lights finally flickered on, casting the room in an eerie glow that revealed a man in his early 50s, expensively dressed, with eyes that matched Gabriel's in color but lacked their warmth. "Nathan," she breathed, recognizing Gabriel's brother from photos she'd seen. His smile was cold as he approached the bed. "And you must be Lila, my brother's impulsive bride, the woman who's given him what I couldn't take away." His gaze dropped to her pregnant belly. The Hayes heirs. Another contraction seized her, and Lila couldn't suppress a gasp of pain. Nathan watched with detached interest. "Inconvenient timing," he observed, "though perhaps convenient for me." "What have you done with my staff, with Charles?" Lila demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your security system had an unfortunate malfunction. The backup generators have been disabled, and the emergency protocols overridden." His tone was casual, as if discussing nothing more consequential than the weather. "Your staff are secured in the East Wing, quite safe, I assure you. I'm not a monster." His smile suggested otherwise. "I merely disabled communication systems and sealed the panic room remotely. A simple demonstration of the vulnerabilities in Gabriel's fortress." Lila's mind raced, calculating options while measuring the increasing frequency of her contractions. The emergency phone by her bed would be useless without power. Her personal phone was charging across the room, too far to reach without Nathan noticing. "What do you want?" she asked, using the conversation to mask another contraction. "Originally, to deliver a message to Gabriel about his continued vulnerabilities." Nathan adjusted his cufflinks with meticulous precision. "My brother believes himself invincible, especially now that he has his precious family. I merely intended to remind him that everything he values remains within my reach." His gaze traveled to her swollen belly, and his smile widened. "Now it seems fate has handed me a more dramatic scenario than I had planned." Another contraction gripped Lila, this one strong enough to make her cry out. Nathan checked his watch with exaggerated casualness. Gabriel should be discovering right about now that the emergency board meeting was fabricated. By the time he makes it back through this storm, he trailed off meaningfully. Understanding dawned with horrifying clarity. "These babies aren't waiting," Lila said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her fear. "They're coming now." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Nathan's aristocratic features. "Surely you're exaggerating." In answer, Lila's body was seized by another contraction, more powerful than the last. When it passed, she fixed Nathan with a steady gaze. "You have two choices," she said, summoning every ounce of strength. "Leave now and hope Gabriel shows mercy when he finds you, or help me deliver your brother's children." Something shifted in Nathan's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at her composure in the face of crisis? Before he could respond, the sound of shattering glass echoed from downstairs, followed by shouting. "Nathan!" Gabriel's voice roared through the mansion, rage and fear evident in every syllable. "If you've touched her—" Relief flooded Lila as hurried footsteps pounded up the stairs. Nathan stepped back from the bed, his momentary vulnerability replaced by a practiced mask of indifference. Gabriel burst through the doorway, rain-soaked and wild-eyed, flanked by security personnel. When he saw Lila on the bed, visibly in labor, and Nathan standing nearby, his expression transformed into something terrifying. "Gabriel!" Lila called, stopping him before he could launch himself at his brother. "The babies, they're coming now!" Those words instantly recalibrated Gabriel's priorities. With a curt nod to security, "Deal with him." He was at Lila's side, his touch infinitely gentle despite the fury still evident in his eyes. "Ambulance?" he asked, tersely. "No time," she gasped, as another contraction seized her. "They're coming too fast." What followed was a blur of activity as the mansion's emergency protocols engaged. The trapped staff were freed. The on-call obstetrician was contacted via video call. Emergency medical supplies were gathered. Through it all, Gabriel remained Lila's rock, holding her hand, wiping her brow. whispering words of encouragement as she labored to bring their children into the world. "I see the head," the nurse announced. More push, Mrs. Hayes." With Gabriel supporting her, Lila gave a final exhaustive push. The room filled with the indignant wail of their firstborn son. "He's perfect," Gabriel whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as the nurse placed the squalling infant briefly against Lila's chest before whisking him away for urgent care. 20 minutes later, their second son arrived, smaller than his brother but with a surprisingly robust cry. And finally, after another agonizing half-hour, their daughter entered the world in silence that terrified her parents until, with skilled intervention from the nurse, she let out a tiny, determined cry. When the medical helicopter finally arrived to transport the premature triplets to the neonatal intensive care unit, Gabriel faced an impossible choice: stay with Lila or accompany their fragile newborns. "Go with them," Lila insisted, exhausted but stable. "I'll follow as soon as I can. They need you more than I do right now." The look Gabriel gave her contained every emotion words could never express: gratitude, love, admiration, and a promise. "You," he said, pressing a fervent kiss to her lips, "are the strongest person I've ever known. I love you beyond reason." As Gabriel departed with their tiny children, Lila finally allowed herself to relax against the pillows. The night's dangers had passed. Nathan was in custody. Their babies, though early, were alive and fighting. In the space of a few chaotic hours, they had officially become a family, and despite the drama of their arrival, despite the ongoing threats from Nathan and the challenges that surely lay ahead, Lila felt only a profound sense of rightness. This was their story, unexpected, unconventional, and undeniably theirs. Chapter 10. Sweet Justice. The garden of the Hayes estate had been transformed into an enchanted wonderland. Crystal decorations hung from flowering cherry trees, catching the sunlight and casting rainbow prisms across the immaculate lawn. A canopy of delicate white fabric billowed gently in the breeze, providing shade for the elegant gathering beneath. 3 identical birthday cakes, 1 pink, 2 blue, waited on a table draped in silk, each topped with a single candle that would later symbolize a remarkable first year of life. At the center of the celebration stood an elaborate 3-tiered fountain, specially commissioned for the occasion. Water trickled musically from tier to tier, the sound blending harmoniously with the notes from the small orchestra playing classical melodies. 1 year had passed since the dramatic birth of the Hayes triplets. 1 year since Nathan's failed attack had led to Lila delivering their children during a thunderstorm, with Gabriel arriving just in time to witness their entry into the world. It had been a year of challenges and triumphs. The first frightening weeks in the NICU, the joyful homecoming when all 3 babies were finally strong enough, the sleepless nights, and the indescribable joy of watching 3 unique personalities emerge. Today, they celebrated not just the first birthday of Lucas, Noah, and Ava, but the miracle of their family's extraordinary journey. Lila stood at the edge of the garden, watching Gabriel kneel in the grass with their children. Though only a year old, the triplets already displayed distinct personalities that amazed everyone who met them. Lucas, the firstborn and strongest of the 3, had recently mastered pulling himself up on furniture and was now determinedly rocking on his hands and knees, preparing for his first crawl toward a colorful ball just beyond his reach. His robust health had been a blessing after those tense first weeks in the NICU. Noah, smaller and more contemplative than his brother, sat contentedly beside their father, his tiny fingers examining a dandelion with the intense focus that so mirrored Gabriel's analytical mind. Of the 3, he seemed most content to observe the world before engaging with it. And Ava, their little princess, with her mother's rich dark curls and cocoa skin combined with her father's penetrating eyes, bounced eagerly in Gabriel's supporting grip. Though the youngest by 8 minutes, she was already showing signs of being the most determined, her tiny fingers gripping Gabriel's as she practiced the standing position she wasn't quite ready for, but insisted on attempting. "They're absolutely perfect," Evelyn Thornton said, appearing at Lila's side. The elderly board member had become an unexpected ally and friend over the past year. "Gabriel looks like a different man when he's with them." It was true. The stern, controlled businessman the world knew disappeared completely when he was with his children. In his place was a devoted father who could spend hours on the nursery floor, who sang lullabies with surprising skill, who photographed every milestone with religious dedication. If someone had told me a year and a half ago that I'd be here, like this, Lila said softly, I would have called them insane. Evelyn's laugh was warm. The best love stories always seem improbable until they happen to you. The party swelled with guests, business associates, friends, and the select staff who had become like family. Charles, who had suffered a concussion defending the nursery during Nathan's attack, now proudly showed off the triplets' photographs to anyone who would listen. Gabriel's brother remained in custody, awaiting trial, his financial empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed. The night of the triplets' birth had sealed his fate. Attacking a pregnant woman had alienated even his most loyal supporters. As the celebration reached its peak, Gabriel approached Lila, slipping his arm around her waist with the easy intimacy they'd developed. "Happy?" he murmured against her ear. She leaned into him, savoring his strength. "Completely." "There's something I want to give you," he said, leading her to a quiet corner of the garden. From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet box. A proper proposal this time. Lila's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal an exquisite diamond ring, far more personal than the hasty band they'd selected at the courthouse all those months ago. "Lila, Marie Hayes," Gabriel said, his voice roughened with emotion. "When I asked you to marry me in that hotel bar, I was a broken man seeking escape. I had no idea I was actually finding my salvation." He took her hand, his thumb caressing her wrist where her pulse raced. "This past year has given me everything I never knew I wanted. A partner, a family, a love I never thought possible." Tears welled in Lila's eyes as he continued. "I'm asking you properly now with full knowledge of what I'm requesting. Will you continue this journey with me? Will you renew our vows before our friends and family, with our children as witnesses, to a commitment made with eyes wide open this time?" "Yes," she whispered, unable to keep the tears from spilling over. "1,000 times, yes." As Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger alongside her original wedding band, applause erupted around them. They turned to find their guests gathered, glasses raised in celebration of their impromptu engagement. The orchestra transitioned to a romantic waltz, and Gabriel led Lila to the center of the garden, drawing her into his arms for a dance that felt both like their first and like coming home. As they moved together beneath the summer sky, a commotion at the garden entrance caught Lila's attention. Her steps faltered as she recognized the two people being reluctantly admitted by security, Ethan and Sophia. They looked strange together, Ethan in an ill-fitting suit that had once been tailored to his frame, Sophia in a dress that tried too hard to impress. Their relationship had clearly weathered poorly. They stood with noticeable distance between them, unified only in their apparent discomfort. Gabriel felt Lila tense in his arms and followed her gaze. His expression hardened instantly. "They weren't invited," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Say the word, and they'll be removed." Lila considered it for a moment, then shook her head. "No, let them stay." "You're sure?" She smiled up at him, a smile filled with confidence that would have been unimaginable to the broken woman he'd met that rainy night. "Absolutely sure. In fact, I think it's perfect." As the dance ended, Lila took Gabriel's hand and approached the unwelcome guests. Conversations quieted around them, guests sensing the drama unfolding. "Ethan..." "Sophia." Lila's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "This is a surprise." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Lila, you look different." Indeed she did. Gone was the insecure young woman they had betrayed. In her place stood the confident Mrs. Hayes, radiant with happiness and the quiet power that came from being truly loved. "Marriage and motherhood agree with me," she replied simply. Sophia's gaze darted between Lila and Gabriel, lingering on their entwined hands, on the new diamond that caught the sunlight. "We heard about your situation," she said, her attempt at nonchalance falling flat. "Triplet birth, very unusual." "Our children are over there," Gabriel said, gesturing to where the nanny and Evelyn were minding the triplets. "Our sons, Lucas and Noah, and our daughter Ava." Ethan's expression was unreadable as he observed the 3 beautiful infants, each bearing unmistakable Hayes features. "Congratulations," he managed finally. "They're impressive." An awkward silence fell, broken when Sophia blurted, "Ethan lost his position at the firm. The merger with Hayes Enterprises meant downsizing." Understanding dawned on Lila. They hadn't come to celebrate, they'd come seeking help, or perhaps merely to satisfy curiosity about the life Lila now led. the life that could have been Sophia's had she not betrayed her best friend. "I'm sorry to hear that," Lila said, and she was surprised to find she meant it. The wound they'd inflicted had led her to Gabriel, to this life, to these children. How could she remain bitter? "Perhaps," Gabriel suggested, his voice neutral but his eyes sharp. "You'd like to enjoy some refreshments before you leave?" The dismissal was polite but unmistakable. Ethan opened his mouth as if to protest, but Sophia touched his arm, shaking her head slightly. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "We won't stay long." As they moved away toward the buffet, Gabriel turned to Lila, concern evident in his eyes. "Are you all right? I should have had security remove them immediately." She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palm. "I'm perfectly all right," she assured him, genuine warmth in her eyes. "Seeing them now is like looking at strangers from another lifetime. There's nothing there anymore. No pain, no anger, just nothing." The realization was liberating. The wound that had once seemed unbearable had healed so completely it had barely left a scar. Gabriel's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. His protective instincts had only grown stronger since the birth of their children, yet he'd learned to trust her strength as well. "They're watching us, you know," he murmured against her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Probably wondering how they could have been so foolish. Then let's give them something to really regret." Lila replied with a mischievous smile, rising on tiptoes to capture his lips in a kiss that spoke volumes about the passion they still shared after everything they'd been through. When they parted, she glanced over to see Ethan and Sophia watching them, twin expressions of loss and regret evident on their faces. For a moment, Lila felt a flicker of sympathy. They would never know this kind of love, this bone-deep connection that had transformed her life. The moment was broken by a cry from Ava, who had spotted her parents and was reaching for them imperiously. Gabriel laughed and crossed to their daughter, scooping her into his arms with practiced ease, while Lila gathered the boys. As the staff began preparing for the cake-cutting ceremony, Lila noticed Ethan and Sophia slipping away through the garden gate, their departure as unremarked as their arrival had been unwelcome. "They're gone," she told Gabriel as they settled the triplets into their special chairs. "Good," he replied simply. Then, studying her face, "No regrets?" Lila looked around at the life they had built together. Their beautiful children, their home filled with love, the happiness that radiated from Gabrielle's once guarded eyes. "Not a single one," she assured him, her heart full to bursting. "Everything that happened led us here, to this moment. How could I regret any of it?" As the guests gathered to sing Happy Birthday, Gabriel stood behind Lila, his arms encircling her and their children in a protective embrace that spoke of a love both fierce and tender. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "Beyond reason, beyond measure." "And I love you," she replied, leaning back against his strength. "My stranger, my husband, my heart." Later, as the evening settled into golden twilight, and the last guests departed, Gabriel and Lila walked through their garden, the sleeping triplets safely tucked away in their nursery. They paused beneath the white gazebo where they had danced earlier, Gabriel pulling Lila into his arms for a kiss that still made her heart race after all they'd shared. "Quite a journey we've had, Mrs. Hayes," he murmured against her lips. "And quite a journey ahead," she replied, her fingers threading through his hair. "From betrayal to chance encounter, from impulsive marriage to profound love. Their story had never followed a conventional path. Yet standing there in the gathering dusk, wrapped in each other's arms with their children sleeping peacefully nearby, Lila knew with absolute certainty that sometimes life's most painful moments led to its greatest blessings. In losing what she thought she wanted, she had found what she truly needed, and in the stranger she'd impulsively married, she had discovered her destiny.